What do you call a project so ambitious it rattles the very heavens? In my day, we'd call it a folly. But more than 4,000 years ago, they called it a ziggurat. And the story we built around it, a tale of pride, confusion, and scattered peoples, says more about us than any pile of bricks ever could. It's also humanity's first attempt to explain a fundamental truth: why we can't seem to understand each other. I'm Jesse, and today we're going to unearth the truth behind the myth. We'll uncover the real tower that scraped the Babylonian sky and inspired the legend. Learn how a conquered people weaponized a story to process their trauma and confusion, and discover what science says about our ancient scattering. This isn't just about a building that failed to reach heaven. It's about an idea that conquered the world. Let's be honest, we live in a world of beautiful noise. Today there are over 7,000 distinct languages and countless dialects spoken on Earth. That's 7,000 different ways to say, "I love you," or "You're standing on my foot." It's a glorious chaos, a symphony of human expression on our little blue marble. But deep in our collective memory, there are stories, old stories, that whisper it wasn't always this way. They whisper of a time of a single shared word. One of the most famous is brief, just 9 verses in the biblical book of Genesis, chapter 11. The story of the Tower of Babel. A story of unity and ambition that went spectacularly sideways because of what we might call a celestial HR incident. For millennia, we've called it a parable about pride. But what if it's something more? What if it's our ancestors' first, brilliant, if slightly dramatic attempt at anthropology? A pre-scientific theory to explain the most baffling thing about our species: why the people in the next valley sound like they're gargling marbles. As the story goes, after the Great Flood, humanity, speaking a single language, settles in Shinar, what we know as Sumer, in the southern region of Mesopotamia. There they devise a plan. Come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. God, seeing this act of unified pride, confounds their speech. Suddenly, the builder shouts for mortar, and the brickmaker hears only gibberish. The project halts in chaos. The people scatter, and the city earns its name, Babel, from the Hebrew balal, meaning to confuse. But here's where this campfire tale becomes more. Genesis 11:3 details the materials with oddly specific DIY instructions. They used brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Why is this so telling? Because if you're a writer in the rocky hills of Canaan, where this story was eventually written, you build with stone. It's the law of the land. But in the river plains of Babylon, stone is a fantasy. Your world is mud. You bake bricks. And for mortar, you use bitumen. That's natural, sticky asphalt, the superglue of the ancient world. The writer of Babel didn't imagine this detail. They knew it. It's a perfect, technical detail a distant storyteller wouldn't likely invent. But why does a shepherd from the hills of Judea know Babylonian building codes? Because in 597 BCE, and again in 586 BCE, the Babylonian army shattered the kingdom of Judah. The Jewish elite, the thinkers, the priests, and probably the writer's grandparents, were marched 1,000 miles to the heart of the empire. They weren't tourists, they were exiles. And for 2 generations, they lived in the shadow of this monstrous, awe-inspiring tower, the ultimate symbol of the power that crushed them, surrounded by a marketplace of foreign tongues. Akkadian salesmen, Aramaic tax collectors, Elamite food vendors. And to top it all off, the local coffee tasted like mud. It was chaos. It was sensory overload. It was Babel. Perhaps the story isn't really about God feeling threatened, but instead about a conquered people suffering from cultural vertigo, looking at this tower and thinking, this right here, this is why we can't understand anybody. They took Babylon's own name, Bab-Eli, which means Gate of God, and linguistically repurposed it into their own word for confusion. In the 6th century BCE, rising from rebellion against Assyria to dominate the ancient Near East, the Neo-Babylonian Empire is the glittering, terrifying superpower of its day. And at its heart, rising like a stairway to the gods, or at least to a very impressive cloud, was the Etemenanki, Sumerian for the temple of the foundation of heaven and earth. They were not a people known for understatement. For centuries, the great city of Babylon, in modern-day Iraq, was little more than a mound in the desert. Early explorers like Claudius James Rich first identified the site in the early 19th century. But it was the German archaeologist Robert Koldewey who, beginning in 1899, launched the first scientific excavation. Unlike previous treasure-hunting expeditions, like that of the British Museum in 1879, Koldewey employed meticulous modern techniques. He pioneered a method for identifying and tracing sun-dried mud brick walls, the primary building material of Mesopotamia, which allowed him to accurately map the city's astonishing layout. Over the course of 18 years, his team unearthed Babylon's grandeur. The magnificent Ishtar Gate, the processional way, the ruins of Nebuchadnezzar's palace. And crucially, he uncovered the colossal square foundation of a gigantic stepped platform. While the towering ziggurat that once stood upon it was long gone, this foundation, measuring roughly 91 meters per side, was the base for the legendary Etemenanki. This stepped pyramid, originally dedicated to the god Marduk, is the overwhelming favorite for the real-world inspiration of the biblical Tower of Babel. Though the site's sacred purpose may date back as far as the 2nd millennium BCE, the awe-inspiring version that captured the ancient imagination and likely inspired the Bible was the one rebuilt to staggering new heights by King Nebuchadnezzar II between 604 and 562 BCE. We aren't guessing about this. We have the bragging rights memo straight from the king himself, carved in a stone stele found at the site. I raised the summit of the tower so that it might rival heaven. I made it to shine like the sun. The ambition is breathtaking, and it's echoed almost verbatim in Genesis. Let us build a tower with its top in the heavens. This isn't coincidence. It's historical gossip that echoes a legend. But wait. The anxiety and fear of fractured language And that deep-seated wonder of why we can't understand each other didn't start with the Bible. Oh no. Centuries before Genesis was set down, the Sumerians had their own version. Written around 2100 BCE, an epically sophisticated poem called Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta was composed. It's a tale of royal rivalry and grand projects. But tucked inside it is something extraordinary. A spell or incantation uttered by King Enmerkar of Uruk. In it, he describes a primordial golden age. A time when the whole universe, the people in unison, spoke to the god Enlil in one tongue. One language for all humanity. Then comes the plea to the god of wisdom, Enki. Depending on how you translate the ancient text, Enki is either asked to restore that single language to help the king's cause, or he is the very one who first confounded human speech to curb our power. The context is different. It's about solving a political dispute, not punishing pride. But the core human fear is identical. The Sumerians, living in a world already filled with different peoples and tongues, were wrestling with the same haunting question. We used to be one. Now we are many. What happened? The Babylonians also had their own version, recorded by priest Berossus in the 3rd century BCE, of gods destroying a tower and mixing mankind's speech. This reveals a crucial truth. The confusion of tongues wasn't a unique Hebrew idea. It was a deep-seated regional anxiety in ancient Mesopotamia. The biblical story of Babel isn't an isolated invention. It's the powerful, final chapter in a conversation that had been echoing across the plains and ziggurats of the Near East for more than a millennium. So, if the confusion wasn't a single dramatic divine event, what was it? Time to swap the ancient scroll for the modern data set. The answer lies in a map. The map in our own DNA. Geneticists call it the out-of-Africa migration. And the evidence from this genetic data to the archaeological record shows that all non-Africans today descend from a single wave of modern humans who left East Africa roughly 70,000 to 50,000 years ago. This was the first and greatest scattering. As these small bands of hunter-gatherers traversed the globe, into Asia, Europe and the Americas, they entered into isolation. And language, like biology, evolves. When a group splits and generations pass without contact, their speech drifts, sounds change, words invent themselves. It's the world's longest, most consequential game of telephone. Take Proto-Indo-European. This was a single language spoken on the Pontic-Caspian steppe, north of the Black Sea, around 4,500 BCE. As those people migrated, some to India, some to Greece, some to Scandinavia, that one language mutated and became dozens. Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, English. The confusion was simply the inevitable result of time, distance, and the human brain's incredible flair for creative tweaking. But why leave? Why did those early groups keep splitting? This brings us to a brilliantly relatable social concept: Dunbar's number. Proposed by anthropologist Robin Dunbar in 1992, it suggests our brains have a built-in limit. We can only truly know about 150 people. Beyond this Dunbar's number, communities require hierarchy, rules and stress. For our ancestors, The natural solution to this social stress wasn't to build a taller tower. It was simpler. Part of the group would decide to see what was over the next hill and beyond the next mountain range. And with that decision, given enough centuries, a new language was born. The scattering wasn't a punishment. It was the original startup spin-off. A survival strategy with a side of linguistic innovation. In the end, we are left with two legacies. The first is stone and bitumen, the real Etemenanki. Finally and thoroughly dismantled, its bricks looted for other projects. The ultimate fixer-upper that never got fixed. The second is made of memory and meaning. It is the story we crafted to explain our dazzling, daunting diversity. Science tells us our language is diversified because we were brave enough, or maybe just annoyed enough, to explore an entire planet. The myth suggests we did so because we once dared to reach for the stars, and according to the story, ticked off the management. They are not contradictory. They are two sides of the same human coin. The Tower of Babel isn't a story of failure. It's a story of beginnings. It is our ancient, poetic answer to the child's question, why are we different? And the answer is, because we fill the world. Our languages aren't the relics of a punishment. They are the living, breathing record of the most incredible journey any species has ever taken. So the next time you struggle to connect or make yourself understood, remember, our diversity isn't a curse, it's our origin story. We were born from a single family on a long walk out of Africa, and our languages are the living record of that incredible journey. The greatest lessons aren't always in the finished tower, but in understanding why we left it behind. If this story shifted your perspective, let me know. Hit that like button and tell me in the comments in your own language. What other global myths should we explore? Subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss our next adventure into the stories we thought we knew. Until then, stay curious and choose wisely.